In this video, we're going to look at another 12 Unity tips in about 10 minutes. This is the second video on Unity tips, so check the playlist linked in the description. Alright, let's begin! Alright, so tip number 21, avoid update performance traps. There are certain things that have a pretty significant performance cost that you should never use on update. For example, over here I've got 3 examples. So we have getComponent, we have find, and we have the camera main. So here's the code that I'm using for testing, just calling these functions, which then do the various things a handful of times. So if we run and look in the profiler, we can see the time that each one takes. So in terms of time, we have testComponent taking 40 milliseconds, testFind taking 40, and the testCamera main taking 16. Now previously, actually camera main used to be one of the worst. What this one would do is it would look for every single object in the world and compare the tag to see if the camera is tagged with the main camera tag. So here in the scene view, I have my main camera, and as you can see, it does have the tag main camera. So previously, this used to be extremely expensive. However, in recent Unity versions, that process is now much faster, but still, you should cache the value when possible. Then the other two, over here, you can also see that they have issues. Calling getComponent takes a bit of time, and doing a transform find a child also takes a bit of time. So the approach for these should always be to cache the values that you need. So you would define some member fields to hold all of these values, and you would grab it simply on awake or on start, so you grab it just once. And then down here, instead of calling these potentially expensive functions, you would simply use the values that you stored previously on the fields. So for the most part, you should never use any of these on every update. Next tip, block UI clicks with invisible images. Now when working in the UI, naturally you have buttons and images that listen and capture the mouse event. So for example, over here is a button. Here it is in the game running, and I can click on the button. Now let's say that you're making a tutorial and you want to disable this button. You can make some complex code to disable the click functionality. Or another approach is to simply make a new UI image, and then in here on the caller simply set the alpha completely to 0. So you do that and then make sure you leave as raycast target enabled. And now if we try, and here it is, and if I try clicking on the left side, nope, can't do it. The image is actually blocking the mouse, and on the right side there's no image, so now it works. So this is extremely useful for making tutorials when you want to block certain parts of your UI. Next, the sorting order in the UI is defined based on the hierarchy position. So the order you see here on these transformed children renders from top to bottom. So first the blue button is rendered, and then the green button is rendered on top of that one. So if you want something to show up on top, you set it to the bottom of the hierarchy. So if I want the blue to show up on top, just click and drag to the bottom of the hierarchy. And the children also works exactly the same way. So if I add an image to this parent container, there you go, you can see the image is that red circle. And then we've got the children, so first the background, and then first this sprite image. So the parent renders, then this child and this child. Then, as you're making your game, you should constantly be following clean code principles in order to keep your code base nice and easy to work with. And a really important part of writing clean code is minimizing access just as much as possible. Now, when you want to expose a field in the editor, you can simply just make it public. And yep, over here we can see our exposed fields and we can set them. However, doing it this way means that these fields are now accessible to every other part of our code. So every other class in our codebase can both read and modify this field. So if this field is meant to be used solely inside this class and nothing else, then we should really just make it as private. So we should do this. However, doing it this way, yep, there you go, it hides it in the editor. So the solution is to add the attribute serialized field. So you add this attribute, and now this private field is still private. However, as you can see, it does show up in the editor. So now it can only be accessed and modified by the code inside that class and also in the editor, meaning that no other classes in the codebase can modify it. Next up, when you have a certain concept that requires multiple pieces of data, you should group that entire concept into a single class. For example, here is a simple script to handle some sort of construction timer. So we have this script which extends monoBehavior, okay. And then the construction data is stored inside this class down here, which holds a float and a simple sprite. Then over here on our script, we have a simple field exposed of this type. However, over here in the editor, we cannot see it because that is a custom class. So we can solve that and make it show up in the editor by adding the attribute system.serializable. So just by adding this, if we go back in the editor, yep, there you go, now it shows up in here, and now over here we can set our data. Related to this last tip is that this same attribute also lets your class be converted into JSON. So for example, if I remove it and over here I do a private void start and I use the JSON utility and convert it to JSON, and do a debug.log to see what this does. And if we run it on this object, it does work. However, if we put this object inside another object, like for example a save object, if we try converting this save object into JSON, let's see, you can see that the second parameter of our custom class is not converted into JSON. But again, if we add the attribute system.serializable, and yep, there you go, now that inner object does indeed get converted into JSON. So if you have issues with empty objects when converting to JSON, make sure you have the attribute serializable. Next up, when making timers, you should increase the amount rather than resetting it back to 0. So for example, over here I have a simple timer script. It increases a timer by time.time, and once it goes past the maximum, it gets reset down to 0. And then we simply do a log on the timer count, so how many times this code runs, as well as the total time. So we're running this every 0.1 seconds. So the first log should be 10 times the second log. And let's test. And yep, there's a console and it's looking mostly fine. So this one is at 12 and this one is at 1.4. So they're pretty similar. However, now a bit later you can see that they are totally out of sync. So this one is at 18.2, so this one should be at 182. Now this has to do with the fact that when you pass the timer max, you are going past it by a certain amount. And when you reset it back down to 0, you are essentially losing that amount. So instead of resetting it directly back to 0, what you should do in order to have a perfect timer is to simply subtract it by the timer max. So by doing this, you are no longer losing the amount that you go past by the timer max. So doing this, even after a long time, you can see that the timers are completely in sync. Next up, avoid magic numbers. So this is one of those that is so easy to do and it greatly increases code readability. So for example, over here is a script that does something. The script uses a whole bunch of numbers over here. Now, if you spend some time studying this code, eventually you'll figure it out since it's a very simple script. However, it still requires you to do a bunch of unnecessary effort in order to decipher what all of these numbers mean. And if we just do some very slight refactoring and use some local variables with proper names, and yep, you can now see that the code is much easier to understand. So we test if the gold amount is bigger than the gold cost, and then we're using physics in order to identify the max building radius, and then we call a function and pass in a construction timer. So now I know what all of these values are supposed to mean rather than having magic numbers where you have to figure it out. This next one is slightly related to the magic numbers tip. So over here I have a simple tooltip class, and then down here it has a simple function to show the tooltip. It takes the text for the tooltip, and then it takes a float for the tooltip timer. So as you can see, this one gets defaulted to -1f. And now in this particular case, you have to guess that -1 is the special value that really means no timer. So up here on our update, we are testing if the timer is not -1f. So if it isn't, then there's the timer. If it is -1f, then it stays visible forever. So this works, but it's very confusing. Essentially, why -1f instead of 0, or why not -10? And also being a float means that it's very brittle. So if you do some math and just pass in -1.1, then all of a sudden your tooltip will show and hide instantly, leaving you very confused. So in order to avoid confusion, you should define a proper class to hold this parameter. So it can be something literally as simple as this. Just a class holding the tooltip timer and a simple float for the timer. And then over here on the show, we receive an object of this type. And then up here, we store that object and we simply test if that object exists. Now it makes more sense that if this object is null, then that means there's no timer. And if it isn't null, then there is a timer. And with this, we also have no more issues with floats. So keep your code readable with proper classes where it makes sense. Next, I have a simple demo here. So the circle will simply move towards the target. There's the circle and yep, gets towards the target. It gets there and it prints a message on the console. So very simple, sort of like a pathfinding script. And as you can see, it works well. The object moves, reaches the target, and fires off the event. So the code is very simple. Just calculate a move direction and move the transform towards that direction along with the move speed and time. And if you get within a small distance, then you have arrived at the target. So this looks good. Then let's say you launch the game with this code and afterwards you start getting complaints from players saying that their objects aren't reaching their target. And after a lot of head scratching, you come to the conclusion that it is probably related to the frame rate. So when making the game, for testing you have the super useful application.target frame rate. So with this you can limit the frame rate in order to tell the game to run at a very specific frame rate. So for example, let's put this running at just 10 frames per second. And there goes the circle, and yep, with this we can see the issue. The object is moving and the movement is based on time, so since the frame rate is so low, it essentially makes huge jumps on every frame and never actually lands on top of the target. So if you use this code, then the game would be broken on people who had slightly weaker machines. So now that you have identified this issue, you can add some code, for example, to test the distance before and after moving. So make sure you always use target frame rate during testing in order to ensure that your game works at all frame rates. Then here's a simple one. Now, events are very useful and you should definitely be using them. So for example, here is an event. And then as you know, in order to fire the event, you simply just call it as if it's a function. So on something happened, in this case using the standard, so this and event r.empty. However, if you run it like this, you're going to have a null reference exception in case this event does not have any subscribers. So before you fire off an event, you need to make sure that it exists. So one approach is to do this. So you test if not null and you fire off the event. So this works, but it would look better if it was a bit more compact. So the way that you can do that is you have the event and then you add a question mark, and then afterwards you can assume that the object is not null. So in this case we can call invoke. So this question mark is the null conditional operator which was introduced in C#6. And essentially what this does is it tests if it's null. So if this object is null, then the code stops executing in here and goes on to the next line. And if it is not null, then it continues forward and runs this code. So in this case, it will invoke the event if not null, and it will skip it if it is null. Next here I have a simple health system. So just storing the current health and the health amount max, starting off with a maximum of 100 hit points and currently with 40 health. And then down here a function to get the health amount normalized. So it returns a value between 0 and 1. So in this case with this amount it should return 0.4. Let's see. And nope, instead we get a 0. The issue is that in here, both the health amount and the health amount max are both defined as ints. So down here, when you divide an int by another int, then the result will be an int. So the result of this division automatically cuts off any decimal points, and that's how you end up with 0. The solution is to convert at least one of these into a float. So you can do a simple cast that one down to a float, then divide by an int. So then you got a float divided by an int, which will result in a float, which works perfectly. And yep, there it is. Now it does indeed return 0.4. So always be aware of exactly how data types work, or you might find yourself very confused in certain scenarios. Alright, so that's 12 more tips. Go watch the first video if you haven't seen it yet. That's where I covered the first 20 tips. I hope you found this video helpful or learned something new. Subscribe to the channel for more Unity tutorials. This video is made possible thanks to these awesome supporters. Go to patreon.com/unitycodemonkey to get some perks and help keep the videos free for everyone. Post any questions I have in comments and I'll see you next time.